Okay, I'm going to get us started, and as new folks come in, we will welcome them as well. But I want to make the most use of our time. So welcome to the first of Avoda's Speak Torah to Power workshop series. I know some of you are familiar with Avodah, and some of you might be new to our work. If any of you are new to us, Avodah is a 20-year-old organization dedicated to teaching and training Jewish justice leaders. We run intensive programs for young adults, and we teach public workshops just like this one. This three-part series today is an outgrowth of our ongoing Speak Torah to Power series, where we ask Jewish leaders to share their wisdom on today's most pressing issues. Today, we're excited to use these videos as sources to deepen our learning. Our educators today are Avodah alumni Sarah Waldbach and Liz London, who are also Avodah Alumni Justice Ambassadors, who are trained facilitators who share our work with the wider Jewish community. Before we begin, I wanted to say we're grateful to the support of UJA Federation of New York, the Federation of Greater Washington, as well as our co-sponsor organizations, Call for Hunger, JFRED, the Jewish Women's Foundation of New York, Shua, and Habonim Dror. I'll be on throughout as tech support, though Liz and Sarah will be walking us through our learning today. If you have any questions, please chat me. We also have closed captioning available today, and you should see a CC bottom at the bottom of your screen if you'd like captioning. We will be doing some of our learning today in breakout rooms. If you want closed captioning during breakouts, just chat me and I'll be sure to put you in a room with captioning. So with all of that being said, I will hand it over to Sarah to start us off.
Thank you so very much, Rachel. Am I heard? Am I being heard right now? I'm not on mute? Okay, great. So welcome everyone. Thank you, Rachel. First, I just wanted to sort of start off with a little bit of a technology disclaimer. We've all been using Zoom most likely for a while now, but we all have different comfort levels. And so, let's just be kind to ourselves and to others as we manage this virtual space together. So my name is Sarah Waldbach. I'm the Director of Development at National Council of Jewish Women, New York. I participated in Avodah's fellowship in 2017, and I've been doing the AJA training sessions for about 2 years now. So what I'd really like for people to do is, take a look at the participant tab, if you can. I look like I'm looking up because my big screen is above. You can see who's there, and you can raise your hand, say yes or no, all sorts of things that you can be doing right now. And if you'd like, to name yourself as well as your preferred pronouns. We're not going to make you do anything, but we would love to know who you are and how to reference you. So I'm going to just sort of jump right into the framing of today's workshop, which is from Tzedakah to Tzedek. And these two words are often used interchangeably, but despite their shared root, they have very different meanings and play out in very different ways. We're going to delve into these concepts to learn a little bit more about the approaches to social justice work, and we're also going to analyze some issues through the lens of root causes and as well as sort of levels of oppression. And we're really going to deepen our understanding of, how poverty and race and gender and all these sorts of things, work together right now, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you can strengthen your work to fight oppression. So what I'm going to ask right now is we're going to take a couple minutes to sort of do a little bit of an intro and icebreaker. So if you'd like, in addition to sharing your name and location, maybe you can share just one social justice action or effort or project that's really inspiring you right now. It could be anything that you're doing, whether it's macro or micro. So, let's see what people have to say a little bit. If you have anything to say, if anything does excite you, I'd love to hear about it. Election worker from Aki, am I saying that right? Great. Anyone else being inspired by organizations or movements or moments? And it's okay if you can't think of any, because we're going to delve right into it. Oh, Margie. Oh, let's unmute you first.
I can do that. I did. I've unmuted myself, but I hit the video. Okay. So yeah, I'm here from New York. And I've been very inspired by the efforts to get people out to vote, particularly minority people and people that are disenfranchised. And I've been working with a few of the groups to try to help in that effort.
Great. Seems like there's a couple people doing some voting work, as well as immigration reform and postcarding.
Right.
Which is really great. Wonderful. We also have a fellow alumna and Avodah staffer on the call, Amanda Linder. Thank you. Nice wave. And inspired by mutual aid work, which is Liz, who is going to be co-educating with me today. So now we're going to just sort of, now that we're sort of framed and really thinking about social justice, we're going to sort of go back to from Tzedakah to Tzedek and what that actually means. So first, I'm going to share with you, if I can copy and paste it all. There we go. Oh, there it goes. Rachel put it in there. If you want to click the document in the chat box, that's going to bring you to this presentation. And it's an interactive Google Doc, so that way we can all participate as if we were together in the room. If you've been to some workshops, sometimes there's a person, scribbling at the top of the board. This is sort of that kind of thing. Because we're all unfortunately separated. So what we're really going to do here with this is we're going to think about sort of what Judaism is sort of ingrained in some of these concepts. So I guess I'm sharing my screen, or Rachel, are you sharing the screen?
Folks can just take a look at it if they want to have it up. You're welcome to have it up, or look at us and just follow along.
Great. So chesed, right? This is an individual act of voluntary kindness. It's a one-to-one. It's from you to your neighbor, sharing a compliment, making a call, bringing some hot soup to someone who's sick. These are very, innate things that we don't always think about. Even just calling up to say, hello, how are you? It's COVID. That's a great example of chesed. The next thing is tzedakah, which we're all familiar with, the tzedakah box that, you may have had, and you put in the quarter that we had when quarters were actually maybe could buy you actually something. That's a dream. And it's usually considered something like donating money, donating time, donating food. Really it's sort of one step removed from the actual individual. It's the way that I like to think about it, is that there's an intermediary. Whereas Tzedek is, the definition is creating a better world by changing systems or structures that create inequality. So this is a more structural issue that is the path forward. It's not the one-to-one. It's not the intermediary. It's that whole structure that we're going to be looking to fix. And that's lobbying for a bill, redistributing resources, which can be seen as, tax dollars going here or there. This could be, advocating in your workplace for better parental leave for all people. It's those kinds of things that really get at the root of why someone is oppressed or, at under-resourced or therefore. It's not a word right now, but that's okay. So after that sort of brief explanation, I'm going to pass it off to Liz, who's going to sort of delve into the root cause tree, which is another visualization that we're going to do.
Thanks, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see many of your faces or see your names on the participant window. I'll just say a very brief word about myself, just for context. I did the Avodah regular Service Corps program in Chicago, 2010 to 11. So it's been quite a while. And now I live in DC. I work for myself. I have a practice doing training and facilitation, mostly focused in conflict resolution and restorative justice. So just a little bit of background. And I worked with young people for many years in different kinds of capacities. And so I actually was familiar with this exercise we're going to do from that work. And so I'm curious, without us going into it yet, if anyone has done like an exercise with a root cause tree. If that rings any bells, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat box if anyone's done something like that. Okay. So it looks like just a few of you. So it'll be a new exercise for us, which is really exciting. So a root cause tree, or really root cause analysis in a greater way, just helps us kind of break down really big and complex issues, for lack of a better word. And in our case, like, we want to look at social justice related issues, and it helps us to understand both the causes, but also some of the differences between the most visible ways on the surface we might see that issue coming up, as well as some of the less visible ways, some of the underlying systems and ideologies that undergird it, that hold it up and sustain it. And that kind of analysis helps us do what this whole presentation is about, is move from Tzedakah to Tzedek and understand what it looks like to work on this sort of root cause level and have this frame of trying to make change on level. So we're gonna hop back to that Google Slides link that Rachel sent out. And we're gonna, or I think folks are already there. We're gonna move to slide 7. So before we go into using this root cause tree for issues that are a little more relevant to what we're trying to dig into around social justice topics that are important to us today, we're going to do an exercise just to kind of see how this framework can work, can help us understand things better. So we're going to take the example of the common cold. So we're going to start with looking at the leaves. So the leaves are the most visible impacts of whatever is in the trunk of the tree, whatever issue we're trying to look at. So in this case, what are the most visible aspects, or really what are the symptoms of the common cold? And to do this, you actually can just double click right on one of those leaves, and there's a little text box there you should be able to type in. It might be a little lopsided, but people are already jumping in, so feel free to do that. And if you're having any trouble, sharing your response, feel free to chat it in the chat box, and then one of the facilitators can paste it over. So again, in the leaves, we're thinking of what are the symptoms, what are the most visible impacts of a common cold? If you saw someone doing these things, or you saw these signs, you would say, oh, this person might have a cold. And so for folks that wrote down here, I'm just gonna cut and paste up at the top. So it's in our leaves. And if you might see something that you're already going to share, so you can just star that if you see an answer that you were also going to put and you just want to echo that. So I see like headache. This might not be visible to other people, but certainly someone who's experiencing it, that might be a symptom that they experience. But certainly some of the things we might see, someone else looking tired or sleepy, I see. Someone might have a runny nose or be sniffling, red eyes, congestion, sneezing, coughing. Great. So these are some of the things that if we saw it, we would say, okay, that might be somebody who has a cold. So now we're going to go down to the roots. So in any of those little text boxes that you see, what we're going to add here is what would cause the common cold? What would be some of the unseen things that might lead to somebody getting a cold in the first place? And I'll paste a couple more, copy and paste a couple more of these boxes just so there's plenty of space for folks to work in. We'll take another 30 seconds to a minute on this one. Great. So I see a bunch of different ideas that are all different reasons that we might see somebody have a common cold: lack of sleep, stress, flying on a plane, virus, contact with someone who's sick, not washing hands, exposure, so some of these are echoing each other, a weakened immune system, poor nutrition, germs, exhaustion, poor self-care, or stress again. So a couple of people echoing that. Great. So this is going to be, again, kind of our template for us to tackle more complex issues. But hopefully it helps just illuminate how this framework is going to be used. Before we dive into a different topic, what we're going to be doing after we watch a quick video is doing this same root cause tree, but looking specifically at racism in America as an example of a social justice issue that's on many of our minds, I think, right now, even more than it might typically be. And we'll see how we can use the tree to kind of start to dissect that and understand that, that complicated issue better. But before we do, we're going to watch a video. So it's on slide 8, but in a moment, Rachel is going to share her screen so that we can all watch it together that way, so we won't be watching on our own screens. But this is from the Speak Torah to Power series that Rachel mentioned before. So this is Rabbi Rachel Timoner, and the title of this presentation was Radical Humanity, Inalienable Dignity in American Foreign Policy, Public Policy. Sorry, I'm struggling to read this, but you can see it on your slide. So I'm gonna pass it to Rachel, who will share screen so that we can watch this clip together and just start to be thinking about what inspiration or what this might illuminate for us as we then start to going deeper into racism in America as an issue that this root cause tree can help us better explore.
I was asked to bring you tonight a revolutionary text. I was asked to bring you a text that we need in this country right now, a text that will enable us to speak Torah to power. But first, a story. One night, Tyrone was standing in front of a bodega convenience store, and he was drinking a soda with a straw. The police came up and arrested him. The charge: possession of drug paraphernalia. Apparently, you can use a straw to carry heroin. The prosecutors offered him a deal: plead guilty and spend just 30 days in Rikers Island, the notorious violence-ridden New York City jail. Tyrone refused to plead guilty for drinking a soda with a straw. Bail was set at $1,500, an amount that he could never afford, nor could anyone in his family. He urged the police to please test the straw. He was sent to Rikers Island. After 5 days, he was called up for a hearing. At the hearing, the prosecutors offered the same deal: plead guilty now and spend 30 days in Rikers Island. Again, he refused to plead guilty for drinking soda with a straw. He was sent back to Rikers Island. Sometime in the next 2 weeks, he was beaten terribly. His eyes were swollen shut. His face was battered and bruised. He said he looked like Frankenstein's brother. 15 days after the first hearing, he was brought back again, and the prosecutors had the test results. The straw, of course, had only soda in it. Tyrone was allowed to go home. He spent 20 days in Rikers Island. He was beaten terribly for the crime of drinking soda while black, for the crime of being too poor to have $1,500 available. Since my congregation has been working on community organizing to address systemic racism in the criminal justice system, we have heard many stories like Tyrone's. Too many stories. Some of them have ended in death. Just last week, we had an action around bail reform, and Akeem Browder came to speak. Akeem is the brother of Khalif Browder, whose name has tragically become well known. Because when Khalif was 16 years old, he was picked up by police for allegedly stealing a backpack. There was never any evidence produced that he had contact with this backpack, but he was thrown in Rikers Island after being unable to meet bail. And he was there for 3 years waiting for a trial that never came. Never did he have a chance to tell his side of the story. Never did he have a chance he was never even proven guilty. There was never evidence presented against him. 3 years he was on Rikers Island, and for much of that time he was held in solitary confinement. He was beaten repeatedly. And after 3 years, the case was just thrown out because it had no merit. And he went home and he killed himself. And his mother, who'd been heartbroken for 3 years, had a heart attack and she died. Nakeem came to tell us that story. Tonight, there are 4,000 people in New York City jails because they're too poor to pay bail. They're in jail because they're poor. They've never had a trial, but they're in jail. That is wrong.
Thanks, Rachel. I think for me, why that video is so important, and the videos that we're gonna be looking at throughout our time together, is just to ground what we're talking about in lived experience, and just remember that even though we might be talking about concepts, things that we read a lot about in the news, just being constantly reminded of the stories of real people for whom this is playing out in their daily lives. Before we jump back into our root cause tree exercise, I just want to give us a second to kind of acknowledge what might have come up for us. So you're welcome to come off mute, or if you just want to drop in the chat box, like anything you're feeling or anything that's sticking with you from that video that we just saw.
Hi, I'll come off mute. I'm Amanda. I am a alum of the Justice Fellowship in New York, and I'm also a staffer at Avodah. And I had the privilege of watching this talk in person a few years ago. And I think the thing that comes up for me is how these two examples are so powerful, but they're just two examples in a sea of 4,000 at least. Every year. And I think that, you know, when there are just so many stories like this, it's hard to actually envision these numbers as real people. And hearing these stories again 3 years later on video just makes it so much more inspiring and so much more imperative that we are doing the work that needs to be done now, so that we don't have another Khalif Browder, so that we don't have kids being thrown in jail for drinking soda, and all of these other really daily life actions that most people who look like me would never have to worry about or think about in their lives.
Thanks, Amanda. I see Margie put in the chat box, unsurprising, sadly, which definitely I would echo. Yeah. These stories are the story, and they require our involvement from Ruth. Thank you. Maybe one or two more if anyone wants to come off mute, no pressure, or wants to chat anything else. So Jane said, a good related book, Locking Up Our Own by James Foreman, is about the history of policing in DC. That's on my bookshelf. I'm sorry to say that I haven't gotten to it yet, but I've heard wonderful things, so thank you for that recommendation. Deb said, very hurtful, but unfortunately it's an everyday occurrence in Black communities. And Jim said, teach me how to move from outrage to action. Absolutely. So that is a great transition point. That's not what we're going to do right this second, but that's part of the trajectory. That's part of Avodah's work is what does action look like? But also part of this work is analysis and understanding the complexity, as I said, of some of these issues, grounding in stories, but also trying to understand these different levels. So we're going to, thanks Rachel, we're going to go back to the Google Slides presentation. And we're going to hop over to slide, oh wow, okay, oh, okay. So we're going to hop over to slide 9. So I see a couple people may have done the cold symptoms in these slides, totally no problem. What we're going to do now is we're going to, as I said, talk about a little bit about racism in America using this root cause tree. So, so what you can do, just like we did before, is we're going to start with the leaves. So we're going to think about what are the most visible impacts, statistics, kind of stories, lived experiences that that we would associate with racism in America. If we saw it, we would think immediately, okay, that's what it looks like. That's some of the stuff that we see that's visible, and whether it's on a daily basis or something that we've read about. So we'll take a couple minutes for that. I'm going to also put a couple of just text boxes at the sides. I realize we have a big group, so if you, I don't know if you can actually see these. Let me add a borderline. If you need more space, you can add them here. So if the leaf, it looks like the leaves are already filled up, so you could take a second and add some more thoughts in any of these text boxes that I'm just posting around. Great. We'll take another minute or two. So if you have anything you want to add, there's definitely space. We can add as many text boxes as needed to get our ideas down. So these might be some of the first things that people think of if you were to ask, like, what does racism in America look like? That's often how we can think of these leaves. Some of the first images that might come to mind or topics that might come to mind for people. So I see a lot of really great ideas here. The achievement gap, incarceration, and connectedly, disproportionately higher rate of Black and Brown folks in jail. Police brutality is obviously at the forefront of kind of the news cycle, or has been more at the forefront, not at the forefront, but more visible, especially in the last several months. On and underemployment, unequal public education. A couple of folks mentioned poverty, redlining and housing segregation, poorly funded schools, underrepresentation in popular media and government, name calling. I would add to that, like hate crimes, again, just as really kind of public, really visible ways that this issue might manifest. Thank you for adding living in fear and stress. Okay.
I just wanted to say one thing to add to your explanation, which was done so beautifully, is I think, and this is named in the document without being explicit, but I think people finally understand health disparities because of COVID and the way that that plays out in communities, thinking about the percentage of the Black population, which I think is like 13%, and the amount of deaths that have been caused by COVID. And I think that sort of really encapsulates it.
Thank you. Yeah. I think a lot of these issues are being brought into much sharper focus right now, for really terrible reasons, because we're seeing them play out on a more national scale, or just because they're getting more coverage. They've always been there, but yeah, I think that's a great example of one that people are seeing in different ways. So thank you. Okay, so now we're going to turn to the roots. So we'll hop over to slide 10. So the roots are, in some ways, what are the causes of racism in America, but also what are some of the systems that uphold it? What are some of the social, historical, political, and economic kind of origins? And I would say the roots are often things that are less visible, either because it's not a concrete thing that we can see, or just because it's sort of been obscured in different ways. So we'll do the same thing. We'll take a couple minutes for folks to add their thoughts into the chat box. And I will also copy and paste a couple more of these so that there's plenty of space. And if your response is a little longer, feel free to make your text box bigger. I don't want you to feel constrained by the small size of these little boxes on the screen. And I'll just say there are times where something that we might have put as one of the leaves also shows up as a root. There are ways in which some of these can show up in multiple places. I see mostly different kinds of responses, but that's okay if here or there might be something that was in the leaves, looks like a visible impact, but there's also a way in which it's a more invisible, or there's some more invisible system upholding that is underneath as well. And I see no lack of ideas from folks, but one thing I'll offer that can be helpful is one thing we can do is look at some of the leaves and kind of ask ourselves, what is underneath that? What creates the foundation for that thing, that visible impact to happen? That can be one way of digging deeper and getting to the roots, although we have such a rich array of responses already. So, but just something to think about. So I'll try to share back some of these. I see a couple things echoed in multiple places, and then just a lot of really, really sharp, thoughtful responses. So see xenophobia mentioned, fear of loss of white power, and then also see white supremacy. Some historical kind of contextual pieces like Jim Crow, slavery is mentioned a few times. Several folks mentioned economic exploitation, or use that term, greed or exploitation. Voter suppression and voter disenfranchisement, which is very much, I think, on a lot of our minds right now, especially as we are in election season, getting very close to the election. Racialized capitalism and billionaires exploiting workers. So also understanding and I think Rabbi Timoner's video does this really beautifully, understanding how the roots often show us intersecting systems. So how economic justice is related to racial justice, and And that I think is shown really poignantly in the example she shares. Colonialism, criminalization of Blackness, medical experimentation, biases, nativism, there were eugenics. This is, yeah, colonialism. This is a really, really full list, I would say. Okay, so we're gonna pause here and transition to the 4 I's, which Sarah's gonna explain in a moment. But we will come back to these root cause trees in a little bit. You'll get a chance to practice doing them with another issue that's of interest to you. But definitely just wanna close this piece by saying, I think what feels most useful to me about this, and particularly about the metaphor of the tree, is that if we think about the visible impacts as being, you know, the things that are most kind of obvious or most present in the public sphere, it's really easy to say, those are the things we need to focus on, and to say, like, we need to, you know, cut down these leaves or tear them down or whatever the metaphor would be, because those are the things that are often most present for them. But if the root structure of a tree is intact, trees lose their leaves all the time and they regrow, right? So it's this idea that if we're not paying attention to what's in the roots and underneath, then those leaves will either, the same things will grow again, or as we've seen over the course of history, we'll see new leaves, but coming from the same roots. And so the issue itself, the trunk itself, is still intact. And so that's one of the things that I think is really powerful about this, this metaphor and this exercise. Okay, thank you all for your participation. And like I said, I'm gonna pass it over to Sarah for the next section.
Thanks, Liz. That was really wonderful and a great transition, because right now we're going to talk about the 4 I's, which is another way of thinking about how these big, tough issues are manifested today. The 4 I's, if you turn to slide 12, you'll see the descriptions of what it is. Internalized, and this is really our self-esteem, who we are, what we believe innately about ourselves that we are imbued with, right? Interpersonal, and these are things that happen between two others. If I say something to you, you're saying something to me, and that's the interpersonal. The internalized is thinking about this myself, right? So internalized, really, we see it through, or the changes that we can make are through unlearning harmful things about what we assume about our own group or person or circumstance. You know, I like to think of sort of in terms of anti-Semitism, sometimes I like to think about, like, you know, not looking Jewish, or I don't look Jewish, or I look too Jewish. And that's something that we create in our minds to think that there is one way to look Jewish. And that's not right, and it's not right for others, and it's not right for us. In terms of the interpersonal, like I said, it's between two folks. We can change this through conversations and discussions and really engaging with other people, other groups, other communities. I think it's really important to spend that time building relationships. Which is a very good way to sort of improve that group person-to-person sense, right? The institutional is sort of like the trees or the trunk a little bit in terms of the system, the structure, the institutions that uphold oppression, right? And we named a whole bunch of those on the root tree. You know, we named, you know, redlining and housing discrimination. You know, we talk about Jim Crow laws, and, you know, I ultimately end up thinking about Brown v. Board and the Voting Rights Act and all those sorts of things that, you know, you would change those things for the institutional through advocacy, voting, lobbying, all those sorts of things. And it's actually something that if you think about it, this is something that goes back to where we started the conversation, right? Chesed is that person to person. Tzedakah is serving through an intermediary. And Tzedek is focusing on that root, that system, the institutions that uphold these things. And finally, the ideology, which is more immaterial, like white supremacy, right? That's what we're really thinking of, where people are coming from and how they frame their reality. for some people, you know, white people are just better. And that's just, we know that's false, but that's their ideology. That's white supremacy. And the way that we can sort of really change those ideologies, I mean, it's really, I think, Liz, you might have really good sort of thinking about restorative justice and how that works. To me, that's a really important way to change the way that someone is viewing the world, their ideology. It's that person to person. So you can see a lot of these themes growing through the system. So does anyone have any questions right now about this? No, doesn't look like it. Okay, great. Rachel, if you could go to slide 13, we're gonna watch a little piece from Yavila McCoy.
Patricia Hill Collins teaches that oppressed groups are often frequently placed in the situation of being
Rachel, do you want me to try? Or you got it?
Patricia Hill Collins teaches that oppressed groups are often frequently placed in the situation of being listened to only if we frame our ideas in language that is familiar to and comfortable for dominant groups. And that this requirement often changes the meaning of our ideas and works to elevate the ideas of the dominant groups as opposed to our own narratives as Black women. As a career Jewish professional, I've encountered the insidious expectations of both racism and sexism, that a woman is to be seen but not heard, that she must choose her words carefully, lest she be considered angry and lose men's partnership. That the cost of access to leadership is assent, agreement, and that calling in our community to the need for social change in all ways that we function must be accomplished in ways that keep us comfortable. I've learned in Jewish practice that the comfort of calling in is entirely preferred to the comfort of calling out our community on the racism, on the sexism, and on the associated violence that we are consciously and unconsciously acting out and enduring with each other each day.
Great, thank you. I always love listening to Yavila. I think she's really wonderful and inspirational. And Liz also mentioned that she liked the metaphor that the ideology is the air we breathe. We don't even know it's there, but it's there all the time. And that is an excellent way to put it. So now we're gonna move to slide 14, where I'm gonna ask you guys to do the same thing that you did with the root cause tree, and feel free to use those same words, because I think, as Liz and I have both sort of shared, that there's a lot of overlap here, and that's okay. So, you know, let's think a little bit about what does internalized racism mean? You know, how does one experience that? Biases, meritocracy, self-hatred. Interesting thoughts. All right, so in terms of the interpersonal, I just sort of see how you guys want to sort of navigate this. The interpersonal, like I said, was person to person. You know, I can go out and say, you know, name calling, right? These are great. These are very much, you know, xenophobia, ignoring people, not hiring someone due to race. You know, that's person to person. You know, maybe you're looking at someone, someone's name, and you assume it to be part of a specific group, right? And you're not hiring because they sound like they might not be white. That is a person to person. Now, institutional, like I said, was, you know, the structures, the systems that hold this in place. It's really the roots, right? The trunk that's sort of holding it up. Great. So we're seeing sort of some of the institutional, it seems to be very, getting a lot of answers, which is the mass incarceration, redlining, educational acceptance. Is that what I'm into, I assume, into higher learning, voter ID laws, gerrymandering, voter suppression. These are all sort of really, you know, interesting ways that uphold racism in America. And I already see the ideological as white supremacy. If anyone else thinks of biologic racism, so sort of like eugenics, this idea that there's a racial hierarchy in science, systemic racism. And I'm curious as to who wrote that and if they want to sort of talk about what they mean by that. I don't know, where are you?
Hi, this is Tina Rodrigue. I'm the president at Beth Shalom Temple. One of the things that we're trying to challenge about ourselves is whether or not these three other areas are creating an accepted ideological system of systemic racism, even though we may on our individual basis may not think of ourselves as having unconscious biases, of not recognizing our interpersonal, of not and not working against the institutional aspects of racism that within our own shul we may have put in place an ideological systemic racism based off of some of these values and norms. So part of what we're trying to do within our shul is reach out to former congregants of color to see what, if any, indicators are there, and lead ourselves, not only the board, but the rest of the congregation, to challenge our own assumptions and look at our artifacts to see what values we have instilled and what we have to very mindfully challenge on the individual level, on the interpersonal level, and on the institutional organizational level.
Absolutely. I think this is, you know, really, really great. A great way to approach it, that systemic racism is sort of this thing that exists and we're sort of we just are with it. Whether or not we intend to, like the air we breathe metaphor that Liz shared. We don't know it's even there. The other sort of thing that I'd like to present, and this may rub people the wrong way, but I definitely saw it on the root cause tree, capitalism is an ideology. It's not a single ideology, there's variations, but we're talking about exploitation, and capitalism and racism are generally inextricably entwined into the value of labor, right? If there's a reason why there's a pay gap, because they value different people in different ways, and it's like literally by the dollar. So, you know, that's one other way to sort of think about how that manifests and why that is. The manifestation of we pay people less is the sort of institutional. The ideological is really, you know, these people don't deserve this money. Women don't deserve money because they're not the head of households. Black people aren't performing as well as white people. Like there's these things that just sort of, they just get justified for no reason based on ideology. Is there any more questions or comments that anyone sort of wants to make about these 4 I's? Okay, great. So the final thing that I sort of want to end on in this section is that, you know, different things can be really used, different problems that you can really tear apart. Hunger and poverty, all these things are really good ways, or those issues are, you know, can be really easily translated into this system that really helps you think about where you need to focus your energy and how and what you're sort of really addressing. You know, giving food to someone is not necessarily stopping the roots of poverty, which is grounded in capitalism and value of labor. that sort of thing. So I'm going to now pass it off to Liz, who's going to really let you explore everything we've just talked about.
Awesome. So we want to give you all a really nice chunk of time to practice with these concepts and kind of apply them to an issue that that you're interested in, that your group wants to delve into more. And again, you saw that there's a lot of similarities between the root cause tree and the 4 eyes, but they also give us different lenses, different ways of looking at complicated issues together. So in just a moment, Rachel is going to break you all up into a couple small groups. If you turn to slide 16, these are the instructions. So once you're in your small groups, you are going to first select an issue. Again, that's kind of broad, but just something in the social justice sphere in some broad way that feels relevant, that feels sort of interesting to the people in your group that you want to dive into more. Then you're going to do the root cause tree. And again, you'll do for the roots, what are some of the underlying causes or systems that uphold it? For the leaves, what are some of the most visible impacts? Then you'll do your 4 eyes for that issue: internalized, interpersonal, institutional, ideological. And then if you have time, you'll be invited to kind of talk about what solutions feel really promising, or like what things come to mind when you think about particularly working from that root level. What are some of the things that could have potential to actually make real change? So going back to this request for like action, like what does that look like? In your small groups, you'll start to think about what are the kinds of things that you think, what actions could be taken that could make real change from that root level. Everyone, welcome back. Thanks for bearing with our little tech snafu. And saw some really wonderful work from both groups. One group focused on immigration and justice, the other on mass incarceration. We don't have time to do a full share back all together, but because you all have the link to the Google Slides, what I would invite you to do is, if you are able and have some time, just hop over to the other group's slides and check out what they came up with, and just get a chance to look into that a little more. So we have just a couple minutes left. I want to close out with one more video. This is from we saw a clip before from Rabbi Rachel Timoner, and we're going to watch one more. This is from the very end of that presentation, and I think it's a really inspirational and exciting note to close on, given some of the stuff we've discussed today. So Rachel, if you can show us that, then we'll come back and do one more closing step together.
And so when we look at all the issues I named at the beginning, everything from healthcare to poverty, to autocratic regimes, to climate change, to gun violence, anything like that, where our governments are failing and our policy is failing to care for and nourish and nurture every human life, is a violation of God's will. We are living at a time when there will be increasing pressure to devalue human life. There are 7.6 billion people on the earth, and the projection is that in 30 years there will be 9 billion people on the earth. With climate change, there will be more and more people displaced, more and more migration, more and more refugees. We're going to see increasing numbers of candidates like the one occupying the Oval Office. People who come to power by scapegoating groups of people. And the question is going to be, how much do we value human life, and which lives do we value? And I bring you this text because as Jews, this is what we stand for. What we need to do is plant our feet and square our shoulders and say, we are Jews. We believe that human life has infinite value. We believe that all human beings are equal without exception. We believe that we are one human family, and even when it seems like we are so divided from each other and we'll never find each other again, we have faith, we believe, we know we come from one source, and we know we can find each other. We know we can bridge our differences. And our diversity Our Torah teaches us our diversity is what testifies to God's greatness. And we stand for policy, for government, in which we have a radical humanity, meaning a radical humaneness, meaning we champion human life, all of it. And that is what we stand for as Jews. Whatever issue you're working on, of the many that I listed and maybe some that I didn't list, they're connected, all the issues, by the question of how much we value human life and which lives we value. And this is the Torah that we're here to teach about the infinite value of human life. This is the way we speak Torah to power. Thank you.
Awesome. So I think that, you know, we spend a lot of time like delving into complexity and looking at issues from different perspectives. And so for me, it's a real, it's really grounding to just close with this note of like, this is about valuing human life. And as Jews, we value human life and we have to, like, that is of the utmost importance. And so I want to kind of offer that in our closing, something to hold, that like we both want to be able to look at these issues and understand how they're working on multiple levels, and that helps us to figure out how to approach them more strategically. And at the same time, there's this simple message about human life, and as Jews we have a call, and it's a commandment that we need to value human life and see all the ways in which that's being violated and work to end that. So before we leave, if you have a minute, if you can add in the chat box any like closing, it can be one word, a closing phrase or thought, just something that you're left with that's sticking with you from our time together today. You can just pop it right in there. It can be brief, but just something, kind of a feeling or a thought or word that's on your mind as we close out. Lots and lots of work to do. Yes. Interconnectedness, beautiful. Yes, so thank you for that question, Jane. The video, the full Speak Torah to Power video, this one, both Rabbi Timoners, Yavila McCoy's, and several others are all available on YouTube in full. I think they're each like 20 to 30 minutes, and they're really fantastic. So Rachel, thank you. Rachel put a link in the chat box for the Speak Torah to Power series. You can watch them all there.
And I'll note, just as you're adding more thoughts, that this is the first of a 3-part series. Today was really about delving into and exploring issues. The next one is going to be exploring methods of social change. So thinking about, I think, a question someone brought in the beginning of how do we tackle them, which maybe you got to a little bit today, once we have an understanding. And then the third session is really going to be about the role of community and how do we do this in groups with other folks. And each of the sessions will view clips of these. And I'll also add, I know some folks on here are educators. We are also going to be sharing out the curriculum that we use tonight. So you can bring this into your work going forward and use these clips as building blocks for learning in your community, whether you're an educator or you're a facilitator or whatever kind of groups that you're in, or just for your own continued learning, including a version of the PowerPoint that you can customize for yourself. And I put in the chat also, and I will email all to you, feedback we'd love. This is a new part of our work. We always love feedback to hear how we can strengthen it. So please, if you have a moment, share that out with us. And thank you all. Liz or Sarah, any other closing words?
Just appreciate everyone's presence and participation, and hope you'll come. I won't be facilitating the next two, but other fantastic leaders will be, and hope that you're able to make one or both of those.
Same. Yes, I will not be there either, but I really appreciated sort of learning with all of you today, and I'm so happy that people are still interested in learning online after months and months of being in front of Zoom. So thank you.
Okay. Have a good night, all.
Thanks. Good night, everyone. Take care.